It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and hope you are doing well. We have got a really interesting guy with us for this segment of the show, Guy Gilchrist. You may not know him front and center. You may not know much about him. We will know much more about him when we're done with this conversation. But he has done all things animated. At the age of 24, he was hand-selected to create Jim Henson's Muppet comic strip that was printed worldwide from 81 to 86. He's also set his hand to such notable cartoons as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, Pink Panther, Fraggle Rock, etc. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee, which we'll talk about that area for sure. He's also syndicated internationally in 80 countries and some 400 newspapers. He also does the work of the comic strip Nancy, and we will talk about that. There's also a new workout that we'll talk about, all kinds of things here. He hails from the northeast part of the country, but now again, as we said earlier, living in Music Town, Nashville, Tennessee. Guy, how are you, my friend?
Oh my gosh! Now the witness protection program is totally off the boards. Now
Yeah.
I got nothing.
Yeah, you got.
I mean, now everybody knows where I live. They know what I do. Gee, thanks, Warner.
Well, that's right. You got to start wearing that fake mustache around now. Yeah. Well, you know what? We have done, I don't know, we've done 700 plus of these shows. We have never had, frankly, an animator. We've had some animation people on, but we've never had a cartoonist on. And it has always intrigued me. How does one break into that business? Do you break in through the cartoon world, or do you break in through the advertising, layout, and design world? Tell us a little bit about how Guy Gilchrist went from being a student to a professional creator of cartoons.
Warner, my path, certainly probably wouldn't be a lot of people's paths. I think that just in radio or like in any other profession, you wind up going the way that you go and looking for the chances that you've got. But mine came from, I left home at a very early age. I was going off to New York City and trying to get work when I was still in high school. And I did. I didn't go to art school or go to college or anything like that. I went to work. And I've been very, very fortunate in that, when I first started out, the advice I've always given everybody is the stuff that I did, which was I would go and look for work any place I possibly could find it as a cartoonist and as a writer. And that meant, doing ads for tiny little firms or making logos for the local plumber or whatever it happened to be. And even in my high school, being the guy that did the cartoons in the newspaper and in our literary magazine and our yearbook and all that kind of stuff. And just venturing out, and getting little by little by little better jobs and better jobs and better jobs.
How as one that does illustration, what percentage of the strip cartoons that we see are all of them illustrated, and the copy and the humor that goes into them done by the same person necessarily, or sometimes is there a writer, so to speak, and an illustrator?
It's about, I'm going to take a wild guess since nothing I know can possibly be totally correct. I'm just going to say that maybe about 60 or 70% of us do the art and do the writing ourselves, and then there are, there are a lot of people that have writers and artists that work together.
So I'm curious as to, is there a style, or do you like working with other people, or do you prefer to do all of it yourself?
I actually like to do it myself. When I first started out with the Muppets first, and then also when I took over the Nancy comic strip, my younger brother Brad used to write with me, and we would share the writing chores, and then I would do the art. and we'd sort of split things up, and that was fun. But at this time in my life, I'm an old guy. I'm 387 years old. People think, oh my gosh, he draws Nancy. That's been around, since Ben Franklin started printing the paper. At this stage, what I really enjoy about the strip is writing it. I actually enjoy writing it much more than just drawing it, because I have things to say, and I get a chance to say them. Right. It's so cool.
Right. So a question for you is, Nancy is a regular feature. Do you feel maybe like an artist that has to come up with a new album once a year, whatever, do you feel incredible pressure to do that? Because obviously in the world of those creative, there are moments when it comes so easily and other moments where it's just really a struggle, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. When you write a comic strip every single day for your entire life, there are certainly going to be a lot of days you just don't have any ideas. You don't feel like it. You're procrastinating. But when I look back I've been at this, just Nancy, for 19 years, and then I've done other comic strips, and I look back over my career, which is, it's sad. I'm so darn old. But I look back and I go, gee, you've kept it up for all of these years. And so I've got a track record, and that gives me actually a lot of confidence in knowing that, okay, well, the joke may not be there right now, but let's try to trick myself into being creative again. Let's give it a shot. And maybe it's just taking my dog for a walk, or getting my mind off of of the problem of looking at that white piece of paper that's so scary every day. But the minute I take my mind off of it, the ideas really start to come.
Are there panels that you've done? And let's just focus on Nancy for right now. Just as you look back over the years, are there maybe top 1, 2, 3 particular panels that you have gotten tremendous feedback on, as opposed to some of the other ones?
Oh yeah. I think certainly, and they're and what's strange, Warner, is they're not the funny ones. The ones that people remember the most are, there's a couple of Sunday pages where I wrote poems that really seemed to touch people, and also I'm a really corny guy. I'm a really patriotic guy. I'm a really kind of faith and family sort of a person, and that's of course what the strip is all about. So I get a lot of reaction from people when, of course, we remember 9/11.
Yeah.
Or if there's somebody famous, that has passed away. Like I just did something on Robin Williams,
yeah,
a couple weeks ago. Those are the things that people tend to come over to me at events where I'm doing speeches or whatnot, doing motivational talks, and they'll talk to me about that. The other thing is they have memorable storylines. There's something like, people are asking me, so what's going on with Aunt Fritzy and Phil? Are they going to get married? That kind of stuff.
Right.
People want to know that kind of stuff,
Right. Hey, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis, again from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. We are in the midst of an interesting segment with Guy Gilchrist, well-known artist, comedian, writer, thought-provoking type indeed. He has been responsible for the Nancy comic strip since 1995, has done several other works that you're well aware of, including Henson's Muppet comic strip, Looney Tunes, cartoons, Tom and Jerry, Fraggle Rock, Pink Panther, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Guy, when you write these and you create things, like all the creative process, I could assume it could be something as simple as cleaning out
Warner, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can we pause this for 1 second?
Sure.
And come back? Okay, terrific. I'll be right back with you. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Sorry about that. I'll be right back with you.
Okay. Hey, Shelby, we just need to, here's what I will do. As I come back into this, I'll ask the question, and you just edit this momentary pause out. So we'll wait for a guy to come back here. Actually, what I'll do is I will reintroduce. I'll say, hey, once again, you're listening to Lewis at Large. I'll start.
That's what you get when you. That's what you get when you have your studio in your house. You know.
No, that's fine. That's not. Again, that's why we're happy this is pre-recorded.
All right. Oh man, I tried to make sure everything was taken care of so that we could do this, and well,
not a problem. Here we go. Hey, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. And in this segment, got a good one going with Guy Gilchrist, well-known, well-traveled, well-pictured artist, has drawn the Nancy comic strip since 1995. Prior to that, did work with Jim Henson's Muppet Comics from 81 to 86, has drawn Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and much, much more.
And boy, am I exhausted.
God, your hands got to be totally tired. That is a question for you. Give us some of the occupational hazards that you might find at being if we were to go into suddenly the work of drawing cartoons and strip comics. What's the occupational hazards there?
Well, your arm does get tired. I've got a couple million miles, I'm sure, on this right arm of mine. Drawing, and of course, then there's the fact that you're writing constantly. You know how you're always coming up with new ideas for your show, and you're always working. No matter what you're doing, you're working. It's the same with me. I actually get paid to think. Warner, I've always considered myself a writer that hires the cheapest artist he could ever possibly find.
and one he knows extremely well.
And one that he can yell at when he's not getting the job done,
right.
And push him at the deadline.
Right.
But I think that all the people in my life are, very, very wonderful to me, because I'm sure it can get exhausting. I'm always writing. I'm always thinking about stuff, and so I may not be in the moment with someone, for a moment. I may be, writing a comic strip, or writing a song, or writing a poem, whatever it happens to be, and my mind is wandering, and that's kind of what I get paid for.
Guy, I'm curious. This is a little bit sort of heady, a little bit higher level question here, but do you look at Nancy and brace yourself, really?
Okay, all right, wait a minute. Let me put my seatbelt on.
Yeah,
Okay,
here we go. Is Nancy to you? Are we watching a character evolve, or are we watching a static character that is simply? And well, not simply, but in many ways, simply a conduit for what's going on currently?
She is living in a world that she's not living in the exact same world that we are. She's living in the funnies. She's living in a town and in a world that I've created. It's a smaller town. It has sort of more loving, caring people, possibly. Everybody knows everybody. Anything can happen because it's a comic strip. I mean, she could be talking to a dog. She could be talking, a giant spring could be bouncing down the sidewalk. Anything could possibly happen in this thing. Aliens could land in our backyard. All kinds of stuff that, would make the news everywhere else, but it's just commonplace in a comic strip. I write from a place where I feel like my heart is. And all of the characters, really, even though I didn't make them up, Ernie Bushmiller did back in 1933, they're all pieces of me. And if I'm doing my job correctly, then if you read the strip, knowing that Nancy's been around 81 years, you're reading it from your perspective, but you're still being entertained. You're saying, like, I've loved Nancy my whole life, and I like this version, and I like the strip today. and maybe there's a 20-year-old who was reading online web comics and clicked on my comic and is reading it for the first time and is saying, well, that's kind of corny, but I think that's kind of cool, you know. And maybe there's an 8-year-old child who, for the very first time, is opening up the funnies on a Sunday. And she's finding it, and she's liking this little girl and her friend Sluggo. If that's happening, and I'm being read today, and I'm relevant, and hopefully I'm funny or I touched your heart today, that's the only place I'm coming from.
Right. So you don't look at, I mean, she is a vehicle, so to speak. She's a conduit, but she also leads her own life and has her own thoughts.
And you know, and there are trends, you know, that go through, you know, our world, of course, and certainly, you know, she's not the same character that she was, you know, in 1933. Right. And it's not just the fact that, you know, there's different technologies and everything. Right. You know, the sensibilities are different because it's somebody else that's writing it.
Right. And speaking of technologies, that's another area I wanted to explore. In a world of an internet that was not around when Nancy was born, with dailies changing dramatically and in many cases going away, how does that change the dynamic of either your just pure distribution of the strip, and beyond that, how maybe you approach things? Do you approach things differently within this changing media world?
That's a great question, and yes, I do, and yes, it has. You know, when I first got into comics, if I was not in your paper, you did not know of me. And still, if I'm not in the paper in a certain town, folks may think that Nancy's not being done anymore. Dailies are, as you say, disappearing. The newspaper is going away. But we have to reach out in every way. We need to present our entertainment content in every which way that we possibly can. So we have books, we have websites, we have an app. We are connected. You can find Nancy at your local newspapers.com, I promise. And we have wonderful partners in Universal Press, my guys, who go out there and are at the cutting edge of publishing. They're always looking for another way for you to enjoy, you know, the comics. So, you know, we're in 80 countries, and we're translated in I don't know how many languages. You know, I have enough problems spelling everything right in English to be thinking about the other stuff. But I know that I'm being read, you know, all around the world. We have all the social media stuff, all of that. There's a lot more going on, you know. Gosh, I'll tell you, in the old days, when I first started out, you drew the strip, you took the originals, or if you were lucky enough or rich enough to have your own copying machine, you'd make copies of it, and you'd mail it to the syndicate, and that was the last you thought about it until your big sack of fan mail or hate mail or whatever it was, you know, came to you. And now, my gosh, you know, it's like we do the strip, and then we put it on Facebook, and we put it on Twitter, and we do this, and we do that.
Right. So the good news is there's immediate delivery. The bad news is the expectations of production and creativity from you probably are heightened a little bit. What about that? That's another logistics question here is how far in advance do you do these? And again, if you're thrown a curveball by the world events, regional events, whatever, and you want to talk about it in the strip and it needs to get out there quickly, are you able to do that pretty easily?
Somewhat. I'm supposed to be 4 to 5 weeks up on my dailies at all times.
Wow.
7 to 8 weeks up on my Sundays. That's minimum because, remember, we have to get translated into a whole bunch of countries, you know, into a bunch of countries, different foreign languages. So it has to get around to an awful lot of places, and they need time to do that. However, if something does happen, and I call the syndicate and say, gosh, can I change my proof? Now, I wouldn't be able to change a strip, let's say, for this week, but I could change something in a couple of weeks. They can go back that far, and they can go back a week or two, and we can adjust things. And there have been times when we've done that.
Do you spend any time? Well, sure you do. You see other strips. Do you learn from them? Do you get inspiration, or are you have consternation from them?
I really don't, on a daily basis, read the other guys and gals' strips. Currently, with my own, even though I absolutely love the funnies. And the funnies is like one of my favorite things to read. But I try to actually keep myself fresh by not following, a lot of what's going on in other comics that would be similar, like family strips, that kind of thing, High and Lois, those kind of strips. However, I really enjoy adventure strips, and I'll read those, like Dick Tracy. I read that all the time, and the guys that are doing that now do a wonderful job.
Right.
And the main thing, though, that I do is, as far as comics, I go back and I read stuff from the 30s and 40s and 50s and stuff, because I'm really engaged in it. I'm loving what I'm reading, and so I'm filling my mind with wonderful, fantastic images and great stories and great gags and stuff like that. But I don't have to worry that somehow or other, it's going to affect me in any way, except, just make me want to feel more creative.
Right. Well, as we start to wind down here, we definitely want to talk about a brand new workout called, of all things, Nancy.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, wow.
How did we ever come up with that name?
My guess is you were asleep and suddenly you sprang up at 3 a.m. and ran to a pad of paper and said, I got the name.
Wow. The webcam was working. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it happened.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, anyway, share with our Lewis at Large listeners, if you would. And again, we're talking to Guy Gilchrist, who illustrates and produces Nancy for the comic strip for your entertainment. Tell us a little bit about the new work and what's up with that.
I am so thrilled with this, and it's actually not even in any stores yet. This has just happened. I've been doing the strip now for almost 20 years, and there have been a lot of Nancy books put out of Ernie Bushmiller stuff, all of the old stuff, which is wonderful. It's all classic stuff. But there's a brand new book called Nancy, and it's a couple hundred pages of my stuff just over the last year or two, if you want to get caught up. And the place that you can find it is at nancyandsluggo.com. We tried to come up with something incredibly difficult for Nancy and Sluggo fans to remember, nancyandsluggo.com.
And you found that website wasn't taken yet, right?
Right. So it's over there along with a lot of other cool stuff. And sort of the nice thing about it is if you order it from there, I sign it for you.
Fabulous. Again, the man, Guy Gilchrist, the comic strip, Nancy, although he has penned many other things, including the Ninja Turtles, Pink Panther. We talked about all that earlier. The new work is called Nancy. It, I'm sure, is completely entertaining. Guy, thank you so much for spending time with us today, and thanks for the laughs that you brought and some of the poignant moments through the comics, and I wish you the best of luck. We'd love to have you on again sometime.
I'd love to be there. I'll see you in the funny papers. Thank you.
We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.